Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Daniel Truex. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rock. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
And I'm excited for our conversation. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Absolutely. So I have a wife, two daughters, both of them I love very much, most important thing in my life. So I'll start there. But as far as the business goes, it actually is kind of a long journey. I'll keep it short so we don't bore your listeners half to death. But I started off actually in the military, Marine Corps Infantry. Did that for 4 years. I got out August of 2001, so right before September 11th of 2001. And I had a friend in the National Guard, and he said, "Hey, they're not going to call you back. Come join the National Guard." And I did that. Deployed a couple times, or actually 3 times with them, and then ultimately ended up joining the Lexington Police Department, where I still currently work as a full-time police officer. I'm also still in the National Guard full-time. But what I found over the years, I've always had an entrepreneurial itch. You can ask my wife about the crazy ideas I've thrown at her over the years, but ultimately I decided that, hey, I'm going to start a business. And the reason I decided that is because I started looking at where I was in my life, and I ultimately decided I wasn't very happy with that. And don't get me wrong, the military, the police department, those are great careers, and they can be very fulfilling. I just wasn't personally finding them that fulfilling. And I said, what am I looking for? What am I trying to do? And I wanted to go back to that itch I've had. And so I decided to start a business. And I said, if I know nothing about business, which I did know nothing at the time, and I still know very little, but if I know nothing about business, I better start one in something that I know something about. And so that was physical security. Kind of aligns directly with everything else I'm doing. And so came up with this idea. I had this guy I worked with, and I said, hey, I'm getting ready to start this. I would love your input, your insight on this. And he said, what's funny is I was thinking about doing the same thing. And bam, our company was born. It's now called, it's different name back then. We had to go through a rebranding, but it's Guard Logic now. We do analytics-based physical security. But we started off and it was really rough. Like I said, knew nothing about business. We made $7,000 the first year. So fantastic first year, right? But we kept focusing and we kept working on doing the things that mattered. And I'm sure we'll get back to that later at some point, but kept focusing on those things that mattered and kept growing and just pushing and working our way through the problems and the challenges that came up with it. And ultimately, we saw exponential growth from that required a pivot to change kind of how we were doing things, what we were doing, looking at our systems, our processes, all that stuff. And like I said, exponential growth. We ended up being the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies, 2022, 2023, which, somewhat of a marketing gimmick, right? But ultimately does indicate you're having some level of growth anyways. And did that. Last year, we crossed 8 figures for the first time, and we're well on our way. We focus on a reoccurring revenue model now, so it's pretty stable as far as those things go. Of course, we're still focused on growing. But he's also full-time police, so we both still have full-time jobs. I serve as the CEO for the company. He serves as the CFO. So really should probably be talking to him. He's way smarter at this stuff than me. But yeah, that's where we're at, and it's been an amazing ride. It's ups and downs. It's the roller coaster that entrepreneurial adventures always are. Been some really hard times and some amazing times, but as we've grown, they typically scale or skew more towards the better. So it's been awesome.
Everyone is probably wondering, how do you build an 8-figure business when the 2 top leaders work full time somewhere else?
And it's a great question, but I think that there's 3 reasons I would put behind this. And the first is that I'm not going to take any credit for that growth, for starters, right? It forces you to do something right off the bat, and it forces you to grow a great team. And that does, up front, you're going to eat a lot of the pain because you have to work a lot more. But ultimately, if you cannot do this with having 2 other jobs or another full-time job, you cannot do it without a great team. And so it forced us to grow a great team from the start. And we have done that. We have an amazing team that, operationally, on the financial, the HR side, all that, they handle it and they do a great job of the day-to-day operations. And it really allows us to focus more on, again, that famous entrepreneurial saying, you should be working on your business, not in it. It allows us to do that. And we can put all of our effort and focus into growing the business. The second thing I'm going to say there is the power of vision. Like having a crystal clear vision is so, so powerful. And I'll give you an example of that. I don't know if you've ever read the book Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. Great book. But I remember I read it years ago, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this because that's what I do. I just instantly leap off the cliff, which we'll talk about later when we talk about finding partners and co-founders. But went and did. I wrote a 3-year vision for our company, published it. We have it printed off, and this is the current one, but it's in a booklet form. And we give it to all of our employees, everybody. I give it occasionally to clients. I share it with them. This is what we're going to be in 3 years. But it gives everybody that crystal clear ideal of what we're working towards. But the power of that, I'm going to tell you, is I wrote the first one in 2020, and it finished in 2023, so last year. And when I wrote it, I wrote things that I just thought were just almost like harebrained dreams. Like this is where I'd love to be in 3 years. And I can tell you this, that we had to stop giving it out to employees and stuff because we'd already passed most of the goals in it in 2023. It just stopped making sense. I think our goal back then was I couldn't imagine having 150 employees, and we passed that significantly. We're like 200 something. You can't give it out to an employee. Like, what are you hoping to lay off 50 of us or something? And so we had to stop giving it out. And that just truly showed me, it was in real time, the power of vision. And so we have another one now we're working through. I still don't know how we're going to get there, but I know that it's possible. And I know that if we just keep pushing forward on that, we're going to do it. And then the third thing I would say that's really, really important is the ability to effectively manage your time. The power of time management is such a critical thing that, unfortunately, I think a lot of people just don't, or they don't put a lot of thought into, a lot of effort into. They're more focused on doing and maybe not doing the right things. And that to me is such a huge one. And it's something that I've been able to effectively implement systems that mostly I've stolen from others, if we're being honest, but has really enabled us to do all those things effectively.
And I love the principles that you're talking about. We always talk about having a clear vision, right? Creating systems and then letting the systems run and finding the right people. So how did you create the great team, though? How did you find the right people and keep them, so to speak, motivated and on track?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you right now, it is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And I think that anybody that's doing, especially in a service-based industry where you're getting, you need a lot of employees, faces that challenge, especially on the front lines. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is we call it our leadership team. So it's our area directors, our assistant area directors, regional director, compliance officers, those kind of positions that we have. And really, it's just focused on, a lot of that has been through relationships. People call it networking, all that stuff, but knowing the person beforehand is so much better than an interview process. And don't get me wrong, we still put people through all the interview process. Everybody gets interviewed. We actually have implemented a methodology called top grading. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Love it. But great book.
Yeah, it is a fantastic book. And we're not perfect at it by any means. But what that comes down to is clearly defining what the position is, what the expectations are at the start, right? And then basing your interview and saying, okay, are they a good fit for this position doing these things, right? Versus just, they're a great person. I like them. They're personable, and you get, this thing. And so we've used that methodology. We're still working on improving it and getting better at it. But even for the frontline officer, that we've created kind of a condensed version of it as well that we use. We have scorecards that we're building. We have some built out for positions, but again, it's an ongoing process. But it's a big part of really being clear and setting those expectations up front. And I'm a clear believer in just how important expectations are. There's nothing that will damage a relationship faster than unmet expectations. And that's a two-way street, right? Try telling your wife you're going to do something over and over and over again and you're just not doing it, right? You're going to damage that relationship. You're going to ruin it. And it's the same with the people that work for you or that you work with. And it's, again, a two-way street. But if you're a listener and you haven't read the book Top Grading, I would really recommend you read it. And there's a lot of great takeaways from that book about how you get that right people in the right seat.
And that's a big part of it. I was just at an event this morning, and they were talking about culture index. And, there's culture index, there's DISC, there's Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs. To me, they all have their pluses and minuses. Use as many as you can, but it's really about the right person in the right seat with the capabilities and the desire to do that particular job. And that's a big part of what comes out of traction and in
Yeah.
that system. And I think more often than not, we don't take the time to define the position, which top grading makes you define the position, set the expectations, make sure that the person can do and is clear on what the expectations are, and then is held accountable to it in bringing it all together. So yeah, I definitely love that. And I think a lot of times that was kind of what was talked about this morning is if people are naturally, I'll call it bold or direct, and then you're dealing with people who are very sociable, or you're dealing with people who are very cautious or, want to know all the details. How do you all communicate effectively? And the fact that you need all of those people, but let's face it, I don't want to put a cautious person in a sales position. I want somebody who loves to be social in a sales position because that's what they're going to have to do. And so it's finding the right fit and understanding all of that. And again, you took the time, it seems like, to build it from the beginning, which a lot of people don't build their foundation. They're like, I'll get to my vision, or it's in my head, or no, you wrote it out and handed it to people and said, this is what we're doing. Come along.
Yeah. And very much so. I mean, again, there's just that vision makes it crystal clear for everyone. And you covered a lot of things in what you just said, without a doubt. But just talking about, you mentioned accountability a little earlier, and that's another just really key thing that top grading, I think, kind of forces. It makes it so crystal clear that if you have a scorecard for somebody, you set those expectations, they either are or aren't meeting them, right? And so holding people accountable is such a critical part as a leader. And again, it's something that people don't like to do. Like, I'm not a huge fan of confrontation, but I can tell you this, that in as an entrepreneur, you have to get very comfortable having uncomfortable conversations with people. And the way I kind of, and this is, we had to let a person go that worked with us for a long time because of this. They were a great person. They really were. They were bought in to what we were trying to do, but ultimately they just weren't able to achieve results. And when it comes down to it, when you have 250 employees, I cannot put them at risk for one person as a CEO. That was the hardest person I've ever had to let go. But it comes down to holding people accountable. And if you don't do that, you're damaging your business, and you have to constantly look at it. And it's not easy, and it's not fun. I mean, if it's fun for you, we have completely different personalities, I guess, but it's not something I enjoy. But it's such a critical piece of building a successful business, no matter what your business is.
And we're a big fan of everyone should have a number, and a number means there's a certain goal for them, right? And then it becomes very simple every week. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you achieve it? Did you not? If you didn't achieve it, what can we do to help you, support you, improve you? And if it's thumbs down week after week after week, well,
Yeah.
I think the person knows where they stand because every week it's been thumbs down, and maybe it isn't a fit. And that happens, and that's okay. Then the question is there a better seat for them in the company? And if not, then you have to make that tough choice. And more often than not, everyone says after they make the tough choice and it's done, everyone starts coming up to them. Oh, we've been waiting for you to do this. It's like, why didn't you tell me it was such a big problem,
Yeah.
But there it
Absolutely.
is. So sometimes we have to make those tough choices. That's why we're the business owner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I have a philosophy behind that, and which is that nobody should ever be surprised. And at the end, kind of what you said, right? They're getting the thumbs down week after week. And if someone is let go and they're surprised, that's on you as a leader. You have failed to communicate that to them. You have failed to set clear expectations. So if, they were surprised, it's on you. So again, we're talking, really, it just goes back to accountability, setting clear expectations, and then holding them accountable. And they know they haven't met it week after week after week, right? Like you said, the thumbs down. And I don't know, that's one of the toughest things about, I think, being a leader in any organization. It doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working for the government like I do on the other side, whatever. If you're not able to do that, it's ultimately going to make it very, very, I would say your odds of succeeding are slim to none at best.
Well, and if you look at the odds of how many companies get to 8 figures, it's tiny. And if you look at how many business owners survive over time, the stats aren't great. And I think it really comes down to the ones who understand the numbers and who set the vision and who have systems and processes in place to be able to do that. So clearly, I mean, you've got to be super efficient in running your company because you're working full time somewhere else. So how do you manage your calendar and how do you make sure that you get done what you need to get done and you're not spending all your time putting out fires?
I have several things here, and I'd like to relate it to the core principles of profit first. If you don't mind, if I go that route, and you can, I mean, feel free to disagree with this, but like I told you prior to starting the show, is I started the book and I started reading through it, and I was reading the core principles, and I was like, this is not just a foundation for managing your money as a business; it is a foundation for managing your time. And so just covering that really quick, the first one is to use smaller plates, right? And so he talks Parkinson's law, which we also talked about just before. Things are going to expand in the time you give them to fill up. And so, and I'm still guilty of this. How often do I, like I said, I need 4 hours to do something that takes an hour? And so condensing those times down and making sure that I am most and it goes into the other ones, but using that time efficiently. So condense the times down. So there's one. Next, he talks about serving sequentially, right? And what he's talking about is how you allocate, things and the importance of that. And what he's really saying, as far as the time side of this goes, is do the important things first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of somewhat related to this Brian Tracy's book, Eat the Frog. Do the hard things first, right? And that's so important too. But here's what I would say about this. And I coach people as well. And one of the things that I do with them at the very start is we do a time audit. And we look at how they spend their time. And they'll spend 5 days is what I like them to do, filling out 15-minute increments, how they spend their time. But the key thing there is that then we go back and we highlight, okay, you have a vision. We talk about building a vision. Your vision and your goals are this. How much time do you actually spend working towards those goals versus just doing stuff, doing the important things? And what we find is that most people don't spend hardly any time. And they can have a day where they feel super productive. And they're just, like, I got so much done. And then we go back and we look at it and you spent 45 minutes working on the things that matter. And so it's that awareness of how you're doing the time, but do the important things first. And once they realize that and they can see like, hey, I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm just not doing the important stuff. Let's put that at the front of the calendar. Let's do that stuff first. Let's do the hard things first. The things I don't want to do, whether it's a phone call you got to make or whatever. Get it out of the way and do it. Everything else becomes easier. And then he talks about removing temptation. And how I would put this is such a critical one. Because how many distractions do we have around us every single day? And there was a couple different studies I read, but it works out to the average American spends about 5 hours on social media and TV a day. And then we talk about how we don't have enough time to do, I'd love to start a business. I just don't have the time. And here you are scrolling Instagram or, TikTok or whatever. And so there was another study I read that said, hey, even having your phone near you is a distraction. And so getting rid of these distractions around you, how does your desk look? How do all these things look? But that enables you to focus and really pay attention to, again, what I talked about, doing the important things that matter. And then he talks about the fourth one was enforce a rhythm, right? And so he's talking about, allocations of payable, doing that 2 times a month. But the way I kind of refer to this in the time management setting is time blocking and scheduling. There's all these tasks that we have, and we know we need to do them. And a lot of them we don't want to do, right? And so what ends up happening is they end up bouncing around our head. And again, they serve as a distraction. So, I gotta go, run this errand. You're working on this. I'll get to that in a minute. And then an hour later pops back up. Get them out of your head. Put them in your calendar and schedule a reminder and get rid of it. When we talked about Dr. Romy and her busy brain, I'm going to tell you, I think the reason I scored so low on that test, which means I guess I don't have this busy brain, and that's an episode, listeners, if you haven't heard, you should definitely go back and listen to. It's an amazing episode. But it takes all the stress out. And again, it allows me to focus on the things that matter. And so when I would say that a lot of these things that I've just said come down to this, doing the things that matter, staying focused on them, and getting those, everything else out of your head or off your plate, because we waste so much time doing worthless tasks, whether it's just emails or social media or internet browsing, etc. So those are big pieces of, just how I manage my time. But it's not that hard. And people, especially when I try to tell them that, and it's not in the coaching environment, just how simple it's not hard. Like I said, it's very simple. Then I think they just eyes are glazing over and they start, whatever. They want something complex and they want something like, oh, it's a super secret. And that's not how it is. It's not hard to do. It can be difficult and it can be challenging. It can take discipline and willpower, and it takes time to build that up. But ultimately, it's simple, just hard.
It's funny because the profit first system is simple. And that was the question I asked Mike. I'm like, Mike, why is it that they don't do simple? He's like, everybody wants a complex solution. People, for whatever reason, look for, oh, that's too simple. It won't work. I need something complex. And like you said, hidden, special. And that isn't the case at all. If you just do the simple things, it's not that, but that is my saying. Doing simple is hard, and it's funny, how that is. And I think there's a similar saying. It's smooth is slow and slow is fast. Or smooth is slow and slow is fast.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Yeah. Said that a lot in the military, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you have to build. What you did is build out your systems, process them, and then they move really, really well. And I do that once a quarter. I go back and I go to my calendar and I go through all my things and I write down, where did all my time go? And I ask myself, was I happy with what that was? Did it match what my expectations were? And I come to realize a lot of times, oh, I thought I was doing all of this. In reality, I wasn't. And then I look at the totals and I'm like, damn, you're wasting a lot of time, right? Because I can see that. And I'm like, interesting. So that then says to me, I've got to get more discipline to it. And I do. And I've created a lot of systems to make things happen. Follow-up emails, and like that's the one thing. You sit here and you go, oh, I need to send an email, but I don't need to send it till Wednesday, and I'm not going to send it Saturday evening because that's weird. And I've just learned to send it Saturday evening, but schedule it to go out Wednesday morning, and then it's off my plate. And I create tasks galore in Google Calendar, and then I can just go crank through them. And when my desk gets messy, I get uptight. I get stressed. And then I sit down and I clean up my desk. And when I'm done, there's like 20 papers becomes half a sheet of to-dos. And then I'm like, oh God, this is simple. I can get this done in 30 minutes. Why didn't I just do that?
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, we waste a ton of time and we waste a ton of money too. There's no doubt about that. We know that from Profit First. Hands
Very
down.
much, yeah. Yeah, and there's so much correlation between time and money. People always talk about how time is the most valuable thing they have, and yet they don't treat it like their money. They treat their time vastly different than they treat their money. And I always find that a bit interesting, and like, why? If people treated their time the same way they treated their money, how much different would they be financially? Or how much different would they be as far as productivity and efficiency go? They'd be vastly different.
And I've noticed myself doing that time audit much more often, just in doing tasks. It's like, all right, why am I doing these things when I could pay somebody $15 an hour or $20 an hour to do this? Like, I got to get that off my plate. And so more and more, what I do is first I look at it and say, can I systematize it? Can I put some sort of system or automation in here to just get rid of it? Or does it even need to be done? And then is it something that I can easily hand off? And yes, in the beginning, it's going to be hard. But over time, it gets so much simpler. And the more you do that, the simpler it becomes. And then everything just starts to flow um, quite well. And I constantly improve. Like we are constantly improving on the systems to make them better, faster, smoother.
Yeah, so true, both personally and professionally, right? I mean, and I haven't talked about it much from a business sense, but yeah, we've focused very heavily on systems and process. Processes matter. And again, when you talk about doing it with the in the context of having other jobs or other careers, if you don't have those systems, then again, somebody else has got to do this stuff for you. If you're building that team, I've talked about it. So we have spent a lot of time, and they're not perfect. And I try to, one of our core values or standards, we call them standards of excellence, but one of our values is we seek to improve every day, no matter how small. They'll never be perfect. And if we can admit that's true, then we know that we always have room to improve. And so that should be a constantly improving process. You don't write a process or develop a system and then you're done with it. No, it's an incremental improvement over time. You're going to find though that the more you use it, like, oh, I can improve a little bit here, I can improve a little bit there. And you have to have a system to come back to that and make sure that you're updating and revising those. Otherwise, they just get put in a drawer and they're not used.
If you improve 1% a day, that's a 365% improvement. 1% a week is still a 52% improvement, which is dramatic. Even 1% a month is still a 12% improvement at the end of the year. Man, if you imagined what would a 12% improvement to your bottom line mean? I mean, that's massive. If you looked at 12% of your top line going to your bottom line, that's a big change. And over time, you can do that.
And yet, how many people and how many businesses have a process for improvement in place? Yeah, very few, I'd say, honestly. And that to us is something, again, that we're not businessmen. We never started as this. And so I think it gave us a sort of like almost a heads up or like we just realized we don't know anything. And so we constantly are working on improving and we'll never know it all. We're never close to it, right? And so what I would really say is that people need to not just say, we pay lip service to improvement. Go ahead.
Very few people who start a business are business people. I just want you to know that. Yeah. The difference between you and them is that you were like, I don't have time to do this because I have a full-time job, so I have to do it right. They just kind of build it and then they get stuck in the fire and they never stop the fire and the fire just continues to build and build. And I think that's the difference. When I've seen people who've had full-time jobs build a business, they have to do it right. They don't have a choice.
Yeah, but it's just, listen, I mean, it's like getting punched in the face. I want to stop getting punched in the face. So I have to solve these problems, and I have to solve these problems in a way that solves them for the future too, right? It's, just another one of those as far as problem goes. You're going to encounter a lot of the same problems over and over again. And if you just keep solving, like you don't put a system in place to solve them in perpetuity, and again, it'll change. It's not forever, but then, yeah, it's such a painful thing. Business and entrepreneurship, it can be as painful as you want. If you're a glutton for punishment, keep taking the punches to the face and don't put a system or process in place to solve it.
So true. I agree with that. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about is how do you find the right partner for your business, right? Because we can't do it all sometimes, and especially in your case, you definitely needed help in the sense that you've got a full-time job. And I know for me, having a partner who is not like me is super helpful because the things I don't want to do, the partner does, and the things the partner doesn't want to do, I don't mind doing. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that is really a great thing. And that is a necessity. If you're both, the visionary, so to speak, then nothing will ever get done. But so you do need to find somebody that balances you out. And the example I'll use in myself and my business partner is that I am very decisive. I am very much a go-getter. I am very just action-oriented. And he's more like, hey, whoa, let's pull those reins back. Let's think through this a bit. Let's talk about it. And what we have done is that we've kind of balanced each other out. And what that takes is, clear communication and relationships. If you don't have a relationship with that person where you can be very blunt with them and very open, like, hey, here's what I'm experiencing, here's what I'm thinking, this is what you're doing is making me feel this, or it's making me think this, whatever. If you can't do that, all you're going to do is hold that inside. You're going to develop resentment for them, and you're really going to become, it's just going to not work out. So I really do think it's important, but you also have to balance the differences with clear communication, because when two different people, that can work out really well or can work out really bad. And so for us, it worked out. But here's the thing I think a lot of people miss in this when they're looking for a founder or they're looking for a business partner. And I'm speaking, let me make this very clear. I'm speaking from my experience. So take that for what it's worth, right? But it also starts with value alignment and what your values are. And if you and your partner are not value aligned, if you don't have the same foundation as far as values go and goals, that sort of thing, you can be two completely different people, but you need to be aligned on value. You both, just to use some cliche ones, if you both really, really value integrity, then that's great. But if one of you does and one of you doesn't, you are in for a really bad time. And so my partner and I are very much aligned on values and foundational pieces of that, and what our goals were. And again, what really helps with that, those foundational pieces, so the values is one of them, but so is vision, right? And if you're aligned on the vision and you're aligned on values, and then you balance each other out, like, to me, that is really that kind of trifecta. We balance each other, we're aligned on values, we have the same goals and vision. And so looking for all three of those aspects, but not leaving out the values and really getting to know that person. There's so many people that start off and they just jump into those business relationships and then they wonder why it didn't work. Well, it'd be the same thing if you went and got married to somebody you didn't know. Like, maybe it'll work out or maybe it won't, but you're really just kind of tossing or flipping a coin there. So for me, that key piece was that we were so aligned on values and it was going to work out. Same vision, same values, and then we're both INTJs for what that's worth, although very different somehow, but we're also very blunt and able to just, I don't know, it helps our communication. And that makes it, whether or not you're a big believer of Myers-Briggs or whatever, but I made you frown. So
No, I didn't frown. I was confused a little. So you're normally an introvert?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely an introvert.
Okay. But neither of you are out really. You created the vision. Okay, that makes sense. I'm an INTJ too, so I know how they think, what they do. We're process systems people. We build out systems and processes, and we let them run, and we keep trying to break them so we can fix them and make them better. That's just our nature, right? What I have heard, though, is when you take an INTJ and you mix it with an ENTJ, then that's what we call rocket fuel. That's where
I've heard that,
really. And so that was where the frown was. I was like, interesting. Okay.
Maybe we would have been a 9-figure business if he was an ENTJ.
There you
whatever,
go. Maybe.
Maybe.
You needed someone but you didn't seem to have trouble selling the vision. So it worked,
Yeah. And you can bring on those extroverts, right?
You can.
Just because we balance each other out, we've got extroverts on our team. And again, realizing that, and I can fake the extrovert for, a couple hours, but it's just draining to me, right? I think it is for most introverts. But ultimately, it's not who I am, right? And so I'm not trying to be that. So find those people, again, that you don't, and here's the other thing I'd say, you don't have to find a business partner or you don't have to find a co-founder. You can hire them. You can bring them on as employees. You can, there's a different relationship there for sure, without a doubt. But you can bring on the people that are balanced out. Two people aren't a perfect balance. They don't make up for every single thing. So bring on that third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh person, whatever it works out for you, to really balance that team.
And I think the key there is to know what you're missing and what you need, and to go looking for that type of personality, value-based person versus the skills per se. I think, you can't teach values and you can't teach personality, but you can teach skills. And so finding that right mix, which is a big part of what top grading does, I think makes that easier.
Yeah.
Is there anything we should have talked about but didn't get a chance to?
No, I mean, I can bore you to death, or I can keep going on anything you want. We talk leadership philosophy, whatever. But no, I do really appreciate the opportunity to be on here and talk with you. I've learned a lot from your episodes, and I would encourage people to go back and just to pick through them and listen to them, because there's some amazing insights, especially if you're like me and know nothing about business still. So I've learned a lot.
I think very few business owners, we learn through the school of hard knocks or by learning from someone else's hard knocks, right? That's just the reality of it.
I'd rather learn that second way. That's what I'm trying to do.
And I am with you. I would rather learn the second way. I'm amazed at how many people want to learn it the first way, which is kind of funny. But hey, to each their own.
Yeah, there very much is.
If people would like to learn more about you, where can they find out more?
They can visit me on LinkedIn. They can visit me at, we're still building the website out. It should be done soon, truexponential.com. It's just TRU and then the word exponential.com. Or they can even email me at dan@truexponential.com. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from anyone, especially if they think I'm wrong. I'd love to hear why I'm wrong. And that to me is actually a very, very important part of my business, but we won't go into it. But having people willing to tell you that you're wrong. So email me and tell me why I'm wrong.
You know, it's funny. We have this saying, average business owners want to be left alone. Good business owners want to be coached. And great business owners want to be told the truth, which is eventually telling you if you're wrong. And that's what we have found. And, you know, I love working with those who want to be told the truth. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Truly an honor.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.